Okay, it's that time of the show where we do our panel segment. And tonight's topic is on suicide prevention. And I'd like to introduce all the people on the panel. First to my left, my dear friend, Jacqueline Shelley. I met Jackie a few years ago under some tough circumstances when her son Daniel took his own life, senior at Long Beach High School. And we became very close after that terrible tragedy. And we worked together, and I promised Jackie we would never forget Daniel. And we're going to promote the Daniel's Dream Foundation. And since then, Jackie has moved from the lovely city of Long Beach down to Alabama, and she's back in town visiting. And it's great to see you again, Jackie. And welcome back to the show, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Howie. It's just lovely to be here, and you are just a wonderful person. And between your work with mental health and with the pride and just all the different things that you work with, the schools. I'm just so happy to be here. I did move to a coastal city called Gulf Shores, Alabama, for emotional reasons, financial reasons. It's very kind area. People are very open. I am doing a lot of work with the Trevor Project, which is LGBTQ. I do a lot of answering calls for suicide prevention, and I have my foundation that I'm still working with, and I'm just basically getting myself settled. It's a lot more cost effective down there, and frankly I have the seasonal affective disorder, which is when it gets dark out and in the winter time, and with my son's anniversary of his death being December 27th, the days are much longer down there and it's warmer, and so my own mental health, I had to make sure that I'm robust. Not that sometimes I don't want to, as I guess they're calling us now bereaved parents. They talked about widows, widowers, and being a parent of somebody who dies by suicide. It was a weird thing. Like, what are you? And they're calling us bereaved parents. So as a bereaved parent, it would dishonor my son for me to just roll over and eat bonbons. So I'm trying to live a healthy life and volunteer and use my time as productively as possible. And it's really been a good thing for me to move down there, although I miss everyone here so much. Everybody has a big part in my heart. And it's just good to be in another place where I'm making more connections and doing more work with LGBTQT, and also with youngsters, and also middle-aged people and elderly people who are at such high risk for suicide. Last night we actually had a Navy Rear Admiral take his life by suicide. And so this is not just an adolescent problem, it's not an older people, it's just a really big problem. And in fact, they said that for the first time in 50 years, the life expectancy of human beings in the United States is going down because of the opioid and the suicide crisis. And the suicide and opioid crisis they're linked. And when we get a chance, I'll just give you a really quick update. There's a lot of new research on suicidality, alienation, and self-harm out there that is, and there are a lot more ways to prevent suicide than we actually knew of before. So I'm working with somebody from the University of Florida. His name is Thomas Joyner, and he's been working with the Navy on suicide prevention, and we have some new what's the word? We have some new ways to help people to get through a suicidal crisis without taking their lives.
Jackie, I feel it's so important to educate people, because I feel that most people out in society, when they hear about a suicide, I just went through something that one of my customers at work, who I knew for about 15, 20 years, his name is Seamus Cullen, he took his own life, shot himself in the head, took his own life. And just hearing what people said about him, that, you know, selfish, he left behind 3 kids, and I just feel it's so important for you to educate the people about when you reach that certain stage, that the pain is so severe. It's not about blaming the person that takes his life. It's the pain is so intense, they feel there's no way out. Let's address that, because it's so important.
Okay, I'm going to just really briefly give you the 3 new things that I've learned. And here they are. Somebody who is in a suicidal state, no matter what the other circumstances are, whether you're, you know, a vet, whether you're elderly, a middle-aged person, this particular theory suggests 3 things. The first thing is that the person is feeling alienated and isolated. So you have somebody who's feeling alone and isolated. That is a perception. It may not be true, but that will exhibit itself in somebody staying in their room and whatnot, or not really, you know, like connecting with people. So alienation and isolation, number 1. Number 2, these people feel like their families and their loved ones would be better off without them being alive. They are not thinking that they are going to cause, my son did not think he was going to cause me pain. He thought he would be a burden on me and my ex-husband for the rest of his life. We, of course, would have done anything for the rest of his life. But this is a perceptual issue. Now, the third thing that is really important that I think needs to get out there is very important. That is that people who are really in danger of going through with the unbelievably heroic act, you know, it sounds crazy, heroic, but it takes so much courage to take your life, because you go against every single human prohibition against death. You take your life, I mean, it's just, so what happens is people start to develop what's called a resistance to pain. They start either drinking too much, having unprotected sex, they start playing with guns, playing with knives, cutting or burning is a really big thing with young people. I know a lot of young people cut, you know, in places where other people can see it, between their legs, under their arms, girls under their breasts, burning themselves, veterans taking drugs, and the more violence the person exposes themselves to, the less pain they feel, because they have this comfort with pain. And in the case of, let's say, a self-cutter or a self-mutilator, they actually feel a relief when they cut themselves, because instead of the pain being inflicted on them from externally, like you're yelling at me and I'm feeling pain, they're taking a razor blade and cutting their, you know, inside of their thigh, and they're saying, I'm the one in control of who causes my pain. But the issue is, you know, so you have the first and the second thing, you know, the isolation and the feeling alienated, feeling like you are a problem to your family, and then you start practicing dangerous behaviors, speeding while driving, young people who like drive like, you know, 100 miles an hour, kids with eye rocks, that's old, I know, but the combination, but the most important thing that we've learned now is that self-harming behaviors. I'm watching a football game here. Guys who actually run into traffic, people who eat nails, people who eat Brillo, people who eat Comet. There are people who do a lot of dangerous behaviors, taking drugs or driving with drugs, or suicide by cop, going in front of a policeman. And so these are the most important things that have come out recently. Now, what they found, they did a study of people who survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. Now, almost everybody who jumps off the Golden Gate Bridge dies. However, of the people who lived, 97% of those people said that they regretted it within the first 2 seconds. It takes 4 seconds to go from the top to the bottom. So 97% of those people said they regretted it and they were so grateful that they lived. The 3%, 2% died by natural causes, and 1% died by suicide. So, and there's a video out there and a movie about a young or middle-aged man who jumped off the bridge and his experience. So we know that most people who die from suicide don't want to die from suicide, but they have no alternative. They feel stigma, they have no mental health services, they feel alone. And what the Navy and my friend Thomas Joyner has experimented with and found out, and why I'm volunteering with the Trevor Foundation as well, is that we can use modern platforms like the text to they send mass texts, the Navy currently, to people who are mentally, who are depressed, with post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, there aren't enough mental health professionals to take care of people. They don't get paid well, they get treated like crap, basically. I'm one of them. So it's tough. But what they're doing is they're connecting with people through the text. They'll say, "Hi, Joe, and how are you doing? We're thinking about you." Now, these are thousands of these texts that are customized, and it's all about increasing the level of interpersonal connection and the feeling. Sometimes my phone doesn't ring for 3 days. Now, luckily, I'm healthy enough to just say, well, people are busy. But I feel lonely when that happens. I do. If my phone doesn't ring or I don't get a text, but I'm not going to take my life. Although, honestly, when my son died, it was, and still is, it's excruciating. However, there are things now that we are coming up with, technologies, including things like a simple hug, human communication, not being afraid to dare to ask. People have to ask their friends, how are you feeling? And do you have a plan? Do you have a method? And if you have they did a study of people with guns in their homes who mental health professionals said, your family member is suicidal. If you have guns in your house, take them out. And do you know what percent of the people took their guns out of their houses?
I'd say 2%.
Like 20%. So 20% of the people who were told that your family member is suicidal, take the guns out of your house. And actually it was 27% of the people didn't take the guns out of their houses. So you have dysfunctional people interacting with these people who need love and affection. So, the comeuppance of my new information is to, at all costs, text, reach out, and also hug people, which is the antidote. You get oxytocin. When I hug Howie, I feel love. And my brain gets this nice, happy feeling, and that actually counteracts my anxiety, my feelings of grief. And my feelings are actually connected to adrenaline and these really terrible feelings. So people who are sitting around alone in their bedrooms, are not getting any oxytocin. And so the best thing to do, and what we're finding, is that we need to reach out to anybody who's mentally, ill or depressed, whether it's by the phone or, that's
I
it.
think that's a perfect lead-in. Several years ago, Mayor has been with me for about 7 years, and I'll never forget it. I was in Manhattan, and it was right after Hurricane Sandy, and Mayor called me and said, I'm at my end. I'm going to take my life today, and I want to end my life. And I told Mayor to call 911, and Mayor, why don't you take it from there? What you were feeling in your struggles dealing with, a lot of it was from bullying and other issues, but talk about that day and some other dark days that you've had to deal with in your journey through life.
This is a big segment. It's much bigger for me than the bullying segment. Yes, I've been bullied, but this segment reaches also my core when it comes to suicide. During Sandy, which happened more than 6 years ago, I believe. Sandy, destroyed 35% of my first floor in the home. Lost everything in the first floor. Thank God I live in a 2-floor home. The second floor was partially also gone due to the toxic mold and everything reaching the second floor of the home. I was at my end because my security and a lot of people's security are their home. And that's heart is where the home is. Home is where the heart is. And that's where your headquarters of where your heart is your home. And losing my house, nearly almost losing the entire house. I live on 300 block on East Market Street, right next to Long Beach Medical Center. At the time was still in office. It was hard. I mean, I went through dark depression days. There was one time I was staying in my aunt's house in New Jersey, and my aunt and my uncle. My uncle doesn't like me, and my uncle thinks that I have mental issues and mental problems, that he doesn't like me. It really took me to my core that I wasn't welcome there, and all I wanted to do that day was take the New Jersey Transit bus to Penn Station and jump in front of a LIRR train. I mentioned specifically LIRR because LIRR is Long Beach, and that train takes me straight to home. And I wanted to jump in front of not an Amtrak, not NJT, but LIRR train. And I've been through a lot of depression. I mean, still till this day, when Jackie Shelley says I do have one of the symptoms, and it's called isolation. I still to this day isolate myself in my room. Like when I get home, I go straight to the room and close the light. And my grandmother says, "Why are you closing the light?" I just say I like to be alone, want to be in the darkness, because that's where I'm actually currently still feeling like sometimes in life where I feel like I'm not good enough for anybody. So I still feel that tension. I don't feel suicidal, but the thought of depression always hits my mind. I'm not here to say that I'm crazy or anything, but everybody goes through depression.
The crazy is Mayor, you would be a blessing to anybody you met. And we are not judgmental people are just people you need to stay away from. But mental illness has nothing to. Crazy is just a non-word. Mental illness and depression. My son was very sick with a physical illness, and it morphed into a depression. And as close as 2 days before he passed away, I had lunch with somebody today, and my son was planning for going to college. He had a girlfriend. He was on medications. He was planning to start to drive. We had really no idea, although we knew that he, had isolation and withdrawal, but he still had a girlfriend. But there's no judgment. Believe me, if I didn't take I am on medication. I am on an antidepressant, because if I don't take an antidepressant, I cry unrelentlessly. So, you know what? It's just, if you have cancer, you take treatment. But that's what we do. But you are a wonderful person, Mayur, and we all have, some people have diabetes, some people have HIV, some people have, the hiccups. I'm not making a joke, but you are a wonderful blessing to the planet. But yet, isolation, I do it myself. Sometimes, that's actually why I had to move, because the amount of light and my seasonal affective disorder, I can't stand this dark weather, and then I can't get up. I can't get out of bed because I think of my son, and I sleep until 11 o'clock, and I set 2 alarms, but that is a symptom of depression, and I have treatment for that. But I have to see a therapist, I have to make sure I get out of my house, and I take medication. But my son did the same, but treatment for my son, 2 days before he died, he was, planning his future. So it's tricky, and we have to monitor our own symptoms and we all need education about, there's no such thing as crazy. There are symptoms of brain disorders, symptoms of physical disorders, but I just, Meyer, you are a wonderful person, and we have to treat our symptoms and not blame ourselves or blame other people, for sure.
Absolutely. I want to get Brandon Ellis involved in this. I mentioned to Brandon during the week that we're doing this segment, and there's one thing I want to bring up that, Brandon can talk about that no one else in this room can talk about, because Brandon is a twin, a triplet. And I remember reading the story, I remember watching a story on TV. The show, Everybody Loves Raymond. In the show, there was a set of twins. I mean, they really weren't on that often, but they were on the show. And they were young, and after the show ended, one of the twins took his own life. And I saw an interview with the mom and the surviving twin, and he said that his life went from being happy and jovial to being constantly lonely, depressed, and very difficult to get through every day, because he said there was such a bond between, look, we came into this world together, we did everything together. Not only were on the show together, we went to school together, we did everything together. And so Brandon, talk about that aspect, that if a twin is so close to another twin, it's that special bond, and I can't imagine what losing a twin would be like.
All right, I'd just like to thank you for having me on the panel, Howie. And I'm a triplet, yeah, so I have 2 twins to choose from here. I love both of my siblings very, very dearly. But if I have to pick favorites, I'm sorry, I have to. My brother, him and I are extremely close. I joke around like we're platonic soulmates, as in we have done everything together, and I appreciate him, flaws and all. And if that were to happen to him, as you said, I would be absolutely devastated. I'd be completely heartbroken, without a doubt. Every life is important. I'm not just saying that because he is my brother. I know him well. I know him as a person. Every person has merit. I've spoken. There's a few people in my life I had to talk down who actually were seriously either self-harming or committing, attempting suicide. So a lot of times they're very in the moment, as you said before.
Or psychotic.
They do feel alone, and they're trapped in this mindset, in this perpetual pain, in this frame of time that they don't feel like they can get out of. But either it's due to circumstances or doubts about themselves, or both. I just want to say that life, it could be horrible, but it is worth living. It is precious. The people in your life are precious. There is value to every single person that you meet. You're not stupid. There's nothing wrong with you. You're who you are, and that makes you you, makes you special, and that's okay. Really, I mean that. Goes for everyone.
Very good. Very well said. All right. I just want to, one thing I wanted to discuss with Jackie, which maybe we have to wrap up the segments because I want to get everybody else in, but the one suicide over the last year that I think has really touched the whole world, because normally you see a person that you read about a person being on drugs or being very depressed, but when Anthony Bourdain took his own life, I think that threw everyone for a loop, and I think a lot of people just don't understand it, because me personally, I used to watch that show, and the word I would use about Anthony Bourdain was envious. Because here's a guy that had visited over 100 different countries in his life. Every time on the segment, he was laughing and joking. He looked so happy. And then one day, I'm driving to the show, and on CBS, they said Anthony Bourdain took his own life. I almost drove off the road. And when a high-profile person like that takes their own life, it just shakes the whole foundation. And Jack, I thought you'd have some really interesting perspective on that terrible tragedy.
Okay, I'll speak quickly because I know I can be verbose.
All right.
Because it's really important to me, and I loved my son so much, and I really care for people, and I could just not do this, but I really want to. And I also felt, between Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain, but Robin Williams. And you know what? It all fades because we live in a culture of success and denial. However, Anthony Bourdain did have many of the predisposing factors for suicide. He had just, that was just when Harvey Weinstein had come out with all of these charges, and I think his partner, he was separated from his wife, but his partner had a relationship with a young man, so he was paying off the young man, if I'm correct, and he was very stressed that this woman he loved so much was involved with two people. He was also a former, I don't know how you say this, but he had a heroin addiction as a young person in college in the 80s and 90s. You'll see him with pictures of long hair. He was very rebellious. And he had a really, I don't want to say nihilistic, but he looked at life and he loved life, and yet, he was a recovering addict who was drinking. He was always drinking.
And the other thing is I want you to touch on is, I remember after he passed, CNN did a special program, and Anderson Cooper mentioned one thing, and he said, look, none of us will ever really know why, but one thing that Anderson Cooper talked about that I think makes sense is that he dealt with a lot of loneliness. He traveled to faraway countries. He was on the road over 200 days a year. He was constantly alone in planes and hotels. And sometimes when a person is lonely for so long, that can affect you as well.
It's Howie. Everybody who takes sociology, everybody who goes to college, takes sociology 101. And the most famous sociologist, although it's been a while, I don't even want to tell you how long since college, Emil Durkheim did a study of suicide, and the number one reason for suicide was in times of alienation, not during times of war when everyone's got their gas coupons and all that. It's when in times of isolation and alienation, when people have everything they need and they see other people having more than them and they feel alone, is when suicide rises. Our death rate is now at the lowest point. We are dying younger than we have died as a culture in the last 50 years because of opioid addiction, which I see as a suicidal gesture. You know, when you're opioid abusing, you're really self-harming. So opioid addiction is just, anyway, a self-harming thing. But yes, loneliness and alienation and us being friends and create positive connections is how we're gonna turn this around.
All right, I really, I want to thank my good friend Jacqueline Shelley for sharing. I want to thank Brandon Ellis for sharing, Mayor Minch for sharing. People spoke from their heart. And Mary, one more word, go ahead.
I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna make this really quick. I'm gonna say, like, there's always help. I mean, you're not stupid, you're not dumb. I know, like, I'm open to everybody in the LGBTQ community. My cousin is a transgender, and I support her. He was a boy, now she's a girl, and her name I will not say, but I do support the LGBTQ community, and it's always good to be open, be upfront. And I know it's kind of shocking, but in the long run, I accept, Mayor Minch, I'm here to pledge and say I accept everyone, whoever they are, and there's always help.
And last, I want to close the segment with this, is that if you're ever at the point where you're severely depressed and you're at your lowest point and you're having suicide thoughts, the hotlines are open 24 hours a day. Here in Long Island, there's Long Island Crisis Center, but every city has a hotline, and
Texts.
and you can text them, you can call them, but again, if you're at that point, reach out. These are people they're professionals, they're trained to deal with people in those states. So pick up the phone, reach out. And the second thing I want to say is if you ever have a friend or someone close to you who is telling you about their loneliness, and depression, anxiety, and feeling very low, listen and try to do everything you can to get them help. So again, thank you, Mayor, Jackie, and Brandon.